My name is Bob Westrope. I am the founder and executive director of Leaders Expedition, also known as LEx. This presentation is the accompaniment to the case for funding document we have prepared for the consideration of the heroic benefactor who will help us connect, empower, and mobilize the community that will change the way leaders lead to transform the world. We live in an age of abundance. Since the Industrial Revolution, there have been exponential advances in science and technology that are now accelerating at a pace that is all but incomprehensible. These gains mean that in the last 10 to 20 years, we have crossed from one historic period to another, from the age of scarcity that defined the human experience since the dawn of time to this new age of abundance, where it was the case that there was too little food, not enough doctors or teachers, not enough resource or infrastructure, not enough money. That is simply no longer true. Where all of the economic orders, mercantilism, communism, capitalism, existed to ration scarce resources in a world too large, today we can feed everyone, house everyone, educate everyone, provide health care to everyone. In fact, thought leaders such as Steven Pinker tell us that there has never been a better time to be a human, to be alive. By any measure, diet, education, mortality, income, more humans are leading materially better lives than even was the case 20 years ago. For the first time in human history, we have the means to assure that we can all live a full life lived with dignity, and to the extent that we cannot do that today, we know that within the very, very near future, those exponential advances in science and technology will assure that we can. And this is just the dawn of this new age. But, there is a but. Those same exponential advances in science and technology are also driving, directly and consequentially, the advent of profound environmental, sociopolitical, cultural, and economic stresses, from climate change to nuclear proliferation, healthcare to education, law and social justice issues, and income inequality, to name just a few. It's clear that humanity is approaching a pivot point, a convergence of many existential issues, where failure to successfully address any one of them is simply inconceivable. Our own eyes and the warnings of many organizations, most notably the United Nations, tell us that we don't have much time. Yet it is increasingly clear that the impact and consequent turbulence of all of these issues simultaneously threatens liberal democracy more than at any other time since World War II, revealing a global, systemic leadership insufficiency and the consequent rise of autocracy or worse. The same technological advances that promise to mitigate or even solve these existential issues also have the potential to halt, if not reverse, the progress of civil society. From fake news to the Orwellian reality of China's social credit program, it seems increasingly possible that insufficient leaders will be tempted to employ such bad actor technology to address the unprecedented stresses noted above. Should this occur before we have substantively addressed the convergence of existential issues, it is highly unlikely that we will be in a position to resolve them when and as is necessary. Which begs the question, are we going to trust only the Darwinist marketplace of ideas to assure that enlightened humanity prevails by 2030? That is, that the millions of charities, nonprofit organizations, NGOs, social enterprises, governments, and other actors, all acting in good faith, will somehow, independently and in concert, head off both convergences? Or do we bias for success humanity's efforts by launching a purposeful, systemic global effort, by connecting, empowering, and mobilizing the community that is powerful enough to transform the world, to change the way leaders lead by 2030, a Manhattan Project scale initiative targeting the root cause of all existential issues, leadership, and predicated on the assumption that failure is not an option. That is Leaders Expedition. LEx is a 3-year-old federally registered nonprofit corporation based in Toronto, Canada, having recruited just over 600 members from 35 plus countries. We are today 100% volunteer-based, with well over 100 activist members investing 10,000 plus hours of their time in the aggregate to conceive of, prototype, and prove a model ready to scale. I have contributed $250,000 and have invested well over 5,000 hours of my time. I believe we offer a credible, proven solution in a world of shockingly few options for which we are raising $10 million. Importantly, we do not claim to have the answer, but rather are confident that we have the platform from which the great many needed solutions, and more to the point, leaders, will emerge. The bedrock, the soul of LEx are our tenets, our vision, mission, charter, and core values. It describes the world we aspire to, the world we want to make. We studied exemplars from many nations and NGOs to define a value system that could inspire the broadest cohort with the greatest diversity of psychographics and demographics possible, rejecting all extremes of the fringe. When asked the question, what does success look like for LEx? It will be to say, when more leaders than not conduct themselves in a manner that is consistent with the LEx tenets. Our moonshot objective is to elevate 1 million LEx members to positions of influence, power, and impact by 2030, from the classroom to the boardroom to the legislature, to very literally change the way leaders lead. Clearly, the audacious challenge of addressing the systemic global leadership insufficiency is to try to untie a Gordian knot of staggering complexity. It is to this challenge that we have invested over 15,000 hours of our time and $250,000 to address. That is to design the elegant ecosystem solution that has the real potential to untie that knot. Our experience and research led us to determine that this ecosystem needed to be comprised in turn of 3 legal entities that together provided the breadth, scale, and scope of infrastructure and resources needed to prevail. The elements are the existing nonprofit organization Leaders Expedition, a planned charitable organization called LEx Learning, itself comprised of LEx Academy and LEx Museum of Leadership, and finally, LEx Leaders Accelerators Fund, a planned for-profit social enterprise. Very importantly, like a 3-legged stool, to remove one element is to assure failure. To create a community that is itself a reflection of the current human experience requires a foundation or platform that will facilitate massive, self-directive, iterative experimentation, collaboration, and learning, and transformative action. That is the LEx Hub. Utilizing a proven Washington, D.C.-based SaaS solution, in turn used by hundreds of the largest charities, nonprofits, and associations in the world, and their 60 million users, we have customized it to be the heart of our global community. And just like the downtown of any city has a marketplace, a school, a hospital, and more to assure the well-being and prosperity of its citizens, so does the LEx Hub provide its members the infrastructure and resources necessary to elevate themselves and thus change the way leaders lead, where they live and where they work. We hold peer support to be a precondition for building teams strong enough to prevail in our mission and purpose. Accordingly, we have drawn from such proven exemplars as Vistage, YPO, CEO Forum, and EO to design, prototype, and launch our local circles. These self-forming impact teams are first responsible for assuring their mutual well-being, success, and elevation, and then so empowered to leverage their collective experience and assets to determine how to start impacting leadership where they live. They do this by conceiving of and executing projects. The model was prototyped and consequently refined for over a year in Toronto, with a completely new first local circle launching in Toronto at the beginning of 2019. That circle is now being joined by a second in Toronto, with over 20 in the process of forming in Edmonton, Calgary, Denver, Saskatoon, Mississauga, Ottawa, Montreal, Washington, D.C., London, and Nairobi, with our most recent launch in Lagos, Nigeria. We envision scores of thousands of local circles existing in 5 to 10 years. The 15 LEx global circles are meant in turn to empower and mobilize large communities, online at first, committed to conceiving of and executing sector-transforming missions, leveraging as a precondition the peer support of each circle's membership. Importantly, we have designed our collaborative space on the LEx Hub to allow us to offer virtually any aligned business, NGO, charity, or nonprofit their own branded workspace within a relevant global circle, not only availing themselves of best-in-class infrastructure at nominal cost, but more importantly, giving them a presence and a voice in contributing to the work of that global circle. This community of communities capability is, we believe, an important differentiator. With the Global Circle for Sustainability and Energy Disruption and the GC for Science and Technology leading the way, most of the remaining 15 global circles are in the process of forming. LEx Learning is a charity that we are opposed to create, not surprisingly, its charitable purpose being education. With LEx Academy, we are using the best-in-class Elevate learning management system to take the learnings from our local and global circles and their projects and missions respectively to provide relevant, structured, and unstructured learning opportunities for both our membership and the public. We imagine leveraging member content initially, complemented with approved third-party content, but as soon as possible, we will start developing purposeful, targeted programs in support of our local and global circles, eventually offering a diverse curriculum of content from preschool to post-secondary. Our first beta of LEx Academy will commence in Q1 2020. The LEx Museum of Leadership may well prove to be the most effective amplifier of the LEx message. We have determined that history provides an infinitely rich treasure of figures that collectively represent the very best of the LEx tenets, to both frame our story and increasingly to define it. Accordingly, under the direction of a leading museum studies expert and resident LEx member, a methodology to curate these figures has been developed so that the first 10 individuals were inducted into the LEx Museum project earlier this year. This online beta exercise is the precursor of what we believe will be a powerful and symbiotic partner to LEx Academy, where both will evolve from a purely online delivery experience to a much richer hybrid of online and classroom learning. Moreover, we imagine that we would mark the 5th year of our 10-year expedition, that is the halfway point, with the opening of a substantive physical campus housing LEx Academy and the LEx Museum of Leadership that would anchor the head office of Leaders Expedition. No community can function without access to capital, and it certainly won't be possible to create the community that is powerful enough to change the way leaders lead in just 10 years without massive capital flow-throughs. Almost all of that we imagine flowing through the for-profit entity LEx Leaders Accelerator funds. First, some background. Cambridge Associates tells us that social impact investing is one of the fastest growing areas of the investment business. Likewise, Forbes reports the 2018 impact investing assets were double the number from just the year before. Indeed, when I attended SOCAP 19 last month in San Francisco, the largest gathering of social impact investors and their client organizations in the world, it was frequently cited that the available impact investing assets was approaching $1 trillion. It was also reported that the consistent inhibitor to growth was the lack of qualified, quality deal flow. Accordingly, the third leg of our stool will be a for-profit social enterprise structured to qualify for B Corp accreditation, led in turn by a best-in-class fund manager. Critically, it is our intent that our portfolio development strategy positions the target beneficiaries as the principal stakeholders, not the investor. Like industry leader Morgan Simon, we believe there is an acceptable ROI that can be generated, especially by our unique ecosystem. So how are we changing leadership? We don't and won't do that by sitting around talking about leadership. With 150,000 books plus on Amazon and with 40 new titles being added each week, the world is not screaming for another opinion. Instead, we are a community of existing and aspiring leaders whose common DNA is our tenets, where we focus first on elevating each other as a precondition to leading by example. We are purposefully empowering the community from which future leaders will be drawn. Our community of community strategy will allow us to access and engage the best minds. And every circle, local, global, and sub, will be an incubator, accelerator, and amplifier for both members and their initiatives, ventures, from Lagos to Memphis, from health and wellness to learning and education. It is this closed loop of facilitating on-the-ground experience with education and funding that is unique and uniquely powerful, especially when enabled by artificial intelligence. Finally, the Gordian knot challenge we face demands a design thinking solution conceived of and executed by a purpose-built world-class team. It was not a spontaneous popular action that led to the eradication programs targeting malaria and polio. It was Bill Gates. Likewise, the targeted effort to eradicate the global systemic leadership insufficiency by 2030 requires equally committed and focused support. Quickly, we believe the Leaders Expedition, the nonprofit head office engine for the whole ecosystem, can be revenue neutral in 2 to 3 years by relying principally on subscription revenues, but also on developing event management, LEx certified coaching and mentoring, consulting, advisory, and think tank solutions, analytics, and media revenue streams. In turn, LEx Learning, being a charitable organization, will rely on donations, but also on sponsorships and fees for courses, programs, and admissions. Finally, LEx Leaders Accelerator funds will be driven by its return on investments. With respect to the use of proceeds, we will adopt a two-team strategy. First, we must recruit a world-class, best-in-class team that is the equal to our Manhattan Project Scale Challenge. They will be onboarded to co-author, develop, and take ownership of the 10-year work-back schedule that will be their first priority. Clearly, the first hire, the COO, is critical. Unencumbered by the need to accept day-to-day operational responsibilities through the onboarding and planning stages, they will do so by the end of the summer. At the same time, we will mobilize the excellent pool of available talent to focus on the tactical deployment of local and global circles and on membership growth until being subsumed by the new executive team. The funds will also be used to seed the startup of both LEx Learning and LEx Leaders Accelerator funds. Our 600 plus members have been heroes with respect to their investment of time and money to conceive of, prototype, and refine the uniquely credible solution that exists today to materially start changing the way leaders lead by 2030. There is no more that we can do without the support of the heroic benefactor who will attract and catalyze her or his peers to provide the funds to allow us to commence scaling our expedition. We seek $10 million. $5 million will be a contribution to Leaders Expedition, half due on signing with the balance due 90 days thereafter. A $2.5 million donation will be made to LEx Learning as soon as the legal entity is created that can issue a tax receipt. This we are ready to do immediately. Finally, a $2.5 million investment will be made to seed the startup of LEx Leaders Accelerator funds. There are many ways to acknowledge and recognize this hero. We are keen to explore all of them as is appropriate. So, if you agree that humanity is facing a convergence of existential issues by 2030, that there is a leadership insufficiency that is systemic and global, that addressing this insufficiency is itself the primary existential challenge, as all others are dependent, and you agree that it must therefore be addressed systemically and globally with a purposeful approach equal in scale and scope to the Manhattan Project, and you have the capacity to do something about it, I submit with the greatest respect, you must then support Leaders Expedition.
We live in an age of abundance, but also a period of profound and troubling paradox. The world has never been so wealthy, yet profoundly inequitable. Society has never been so connected, yet divided by angry rhetoric and tribal chasms. But humankind is a single tribe. We are all on this journey together. At Leaders Expedition, we believe the root cause of the challenges we face is the insufficiency of leadership. We believe true leadership is not about driving people apart, but bringing them together. This is the imperative of our time. Our 10-year mission is to connect, empower, and mobilize 1 million people from all walks of life into a global community of leader creators who will transform the world's classrooms, boardrooms, and legislators. We seek to replace rancor with reason, distemper with civility, and pessimism with faith in the awesome potential of humanity. That is the essence of inspired leadership. That is when we all win. Please join us on our expedition. Our world is counting on it.